Playing with Power MTG. Powerful cards, powerful formats. Be sure to check out Dragon Shield for all of the best accessories to protect your decks. TCG Player for cards at great prices while supporting local game stores. And Patreon, where you get awesome benefits for your direct support. Our Mox Pearl tier has a few spots open this month. If you ever wanted to be on an episode, be sure to sign up to our Patreon. The Mox Pearl tier has all kinds of other benefits as well. There are only a few spots left and they will be gone quickly, so sign up right away. We look forward to seeing you and playing with you soon. Now, let's start out by showcasing our fighters this evening. First, we have Ryan piloting Aurelia, the War Leader. This deck uses Aurelia's combat ability in conjunction with flickering effects in order to attack infinitely and win the game. Ryan's opening hand contains a Jeweled Lotus, Red Elemental Blast, Paladin Class, Boros Signet, Jeska's Will, Marsh Flats, and a Lion Sash. Next, we have Tyler piloting Kenrith, the Return King. This mid-range deck builds its board state, accrues value, and then wins the game with overwhelming advantage engines like Smothering Tithe and Whirlpool Warrior. Tyler's opening hand contains an Underground Sea, Tropical Island, Smothering Tithe, Dovin's Veto, Pact of Negation, and his London Mulligan is Azurta the Dawnwaker. After that, we have Zane piloting Hinata, Dawncrowned. This deck applies pressure through light stacks, breaks parity with X spells, and then wins through Dualcaster or Breach Lines. Zane's opening hand contains a Mana Confluence, Path to Exile, Esper Sentinel, Jeweled Lotus, Tundra, Heliod's Intervention, and a Deflecting Swat. Finally, we have Mike piloting the partner pair of Thrasios Triton Hero and Vial Smasher the Fierce. This deck tries to assemble a Hermit Druid combo as soon as possible and race the table and win the game. Mike's opening hand contains a Flusterstorm, Elves of Deep Shadow, Vampiric Tutor, Chrome Mox, Postmortem Lunge, Taiga, and a Mana Confluence. Without further ado, let's kick off this big babbling bumbling backstage bazaar. Ryan wins the Everyone Feels Sorry for You for Playing Boros challenge and gets to start us off. Ryan draws a card for turn and plays a Marsh Flats. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a plateau onto the battlefield. He casts a Paladin Class and passes the turn. Tyler draws a card for turn and plays a Tropical Island. He passes. Zane draws and plays a Mana Confluence. He taps his Confluence to help cast Esper Sentinel. He casts a Jeweled Lotus and gives the turn to Mike. Mike draws and also plays a Mana Confluence. He casts a Chrome Mox. Esper triggers and Mike pays. Chrome Mox enters and Mike imprints Postmortem Lunge. Mike ends his turn. Ryan draws and plays an Arid Mesa. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a Sacred Foundry onto the battlefield untapped, paying 2 life. He casts Boros Signet. Esper triggers and Zane draws. Ryan casts a Jeweled Lotus of his own. Ryan ships the turn to Tyler. Tyler draws and plays an Underground Sea. He passes. Zane draws and plays a Tundra. He casts a Mox Opal. He cracks his Jeweled Lotus to help cast his commander, Hinata, Dawncrowned. In response, Mike casts Vampiric Tutor. Esper Sentinel triggers and Zane draws. Mike then fetches up a card onto the top of his library and loses 2 life. Hinata resolves and Zane passes the turn. Mike draws and plays a Taiga. He casts a Dockside Extortionist. It enters and Mike creates 5 treasures. He pays 2 life to help cast Birthing Pod. Mike pays 2 life to activate Birthing Pod, sacrificing Dockside and fetching up a Spellseeker onto the battlefield. Spellseeker enters and Mike fetches up a Reanimate into his hand. All through, Mike passes. Ryan draws and casts his commander, Aurelia the War Leader. He moves to combat and attacks Mike with Aurelia. Aurelia triggers and untaps. Mike takes it and then Ryan moves to his next combat, attacking Mike again. Mike takes it again and Ryan passes the turn. Tyler draws and plays an island. Tyler passes. Zane draws and plays a Misty Rainforest. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a Volcanic Island onto the battlefield. He casts Ponder. He looks at the top 3, rearranges, and draws. He casts a Mana Crypt. He attacks Mike with Hinata. Mike takes it, and Zane ends his turn. During Mike's upkeep, Zane casts Heliod's Intervention, targeting every artifact and enchantment his opponents control, reduced through Hinata. They are all destroyed, and Mike draws for turn. In his main phase, he taps his Mana Confluence to cast Reanimate, targeting Dockside in his graveyard. Esper triggers, and Zane draws. Dockside enters, Mike loses 2, and then he creates 3 treasures. He casts Rhystic Study. In response, Zane casts Intuition. In response, Tyler casts Mana Drain. Esper triggers and Zane draws. In response, Zane casts Deflecting Swat for its alternate cost, targeting Mana Drain. Swat resolves, redirecting Mana Drain to Swat itself. Then Mana Drain fizzles and Intuition resolves. Zane fetches up a Savine's Reclamation, Lion's Eye Diamond, and an Underworld Breach. Mike gives Zane LED and the rest go to his graveyard. Then Rhystic Study resolves. Mike moves to combat and attacks Zane with Spellseeker. Zane takes it and Mike passes the turn. Ryan draws and plays a City of Brass. He attacks Mike with Aurelia, gets an extra combat, and attacks Mike again. Mike takes it both times and Ryan passes the turn. Tyler draws and plays a Reflecting Pool. He casts Smothering Tithe. Rhystic and Sentinel triggers and Mike and Zane draw. In response, Zane casts Force of Negation for its alternate cost, exiling a blue card targeting Tithe. Rhystic triggers and Mike draws. Then Force of Negation counters and exiles Smothering Tithe. Tyler sighs and passes to Zane. During his upkeep, Zane casts Mystical Tutor. Rhystic triggers and Mike draws. Zane fetches up a Brain Freeze onto the top of his library. He then wins his Mana Crypt roll. He draws and plays a Polluted Delta. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a Hallowed Fountain onto the battlefield untapped, paying 2 life. He casts a Ranger Captain of Eos. Rhystic triggers and Mike draws. In response, Ryan flashes in a Cathar Commando and Mike draws through Rhystic. Ranger Captain enters and Zane fetches up a Ragavan Nimble Pilferer into his hand. Then Zane activates Ranger Captain, sacrificing it, locking out his opponents of non-creature spells this turn. Zane casts Lion's Eye Diamond and Mike draws through Rhystic. He cracks it, discards his hand, and adds 3 white. He flashes back Savine's Reclamation from his graveyard. Mike draws through Rhystic and Zane returns Underworld Breach and Lion's Eye Diamond to the battlefield. He cracks LED for 3 blue and then escapes Brain Freeze from his graveyard with all copies targeting himself. Rhystic triggers and Mike draws. In response, Ryan taps the City of Brass to help activate Cathar Commando, sacrificing it and targeting Underworld Breach. In response, Zane escapes Deflecting Swat from his graveyard. He changes the target of Commando to Rhystic Study, destroying it. Then Brain Freeze resolves and Zane mills. Zane presents a loop of escaping LED, cracking it for 3 blue, then escaping Brain Freeze, milling himself out. He then mills out all of his opponents. When he mills out Mike, Zane notices that Mike milled Memory's Journey, which is a huge problem because Mike can untap and win. So, Zane escapes Twin Flame from his graveyard, holds priority, and escapes Dualcaster Mage from his graveyard, copying Twin Flame. He presents another loop of creating infinite hasty Dualcasters, attacks everyone with all of them, and then Zane wins the game. Wow, what a quick game. Let's do another, shall we? In this game, Tyler brings back Kenrith, and his opening hand contains a Scalding Tarn, Polluted Delta, Tarnished Citadel, Mox Diamond, Time Twister, Windfall, and an Enlightened Tutor. Zane brings back Hinata, and his opening hand contains a Tundra, Sol Ring, Arcane Signet, Drannith Magistrate, Gamble, Force of Will, and a Mental Misstep. Mike brings back Thrasios and Vial Smasher, and his opening hand contains a Laboratory Maniac, Ignoble Hierarch, Lotus Petal, Dockside Extortionist, Gemstone Caverns, Misty Rainforest, and a Polluted Delta. Ryan brings back Aurelia, and his opening hand contains a Ledvala Keeper of Silence, Fighter Class, Drannith Magistrate, Recruiter of the Guard, Chrome Mox, Flooded Strand, and a Gamble. And Tyler gets to start us off. But Mike has a pre-game action and puts Gemstone Caverns onto the battlefield, exiling Misty Rainforest. Tyler draws and casts a Mox Diamond, discarding Tarnished Citadel. He plays a Scalding Tarn and passes the turn. Zane draws and plays a Tundra. He casts a Sol Ring. He casts an Arcane Signet. He passes. Mike draws and plays a Polluted Delta. He casts a Lotus Petal. He cracks his Polluted Delta, pays a life, and fetches up an Underground Sea onto the battlefield. He casts Ignoble Hierarch. He casts his commander, Thrasios, Triton Hero. Mike ends his turn. Ryan draws and plays a Flooded Strand. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a Plateau onto the battlefield. He casts Chrome Mox, imprinting Fighter Class. He casts Drannith Magistrate. Everyone groans, and Tyler responds by casting Enlightened Tutor. In response, Zane pays 2 life to cast Mental Misstep, countering Enlightened Tutor. Drannith resolves, and Ryan passes to Tyler. At the end of Ryan's turn, Tyler cracks his Scalding Tarn, pays a life, and fetches up a Tundra onto the battlefield. And then Ryan eats his dinner. Tyler draws and plays a Polluted Delta. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a Tropical Island onto the battlefield. He casts Regrowth, returning Enlightened Tutor to his hand. Tyler passes. Zane draws and casts Gamble. In response, Tyler recasts his Enlightened Tutor. He fetches up a Rhystic Study onto the top of his library. Then Zane fetches up a card into his hand and randomly discards a Force of Will. Zane then surprisingly casts a Rhystic Study of his own. The table has a sensible chuckle, and Zane gives the turn to Mike. Mike draws and casts a Dockside Extortionist. Rhystic triggers and Mike pays. Dockside resolves and Mike creates 5 treasures. He casts Aether Vial and Zane draws through Rhystic. Mike passes the turn. Ryan draws and plays a Snow-Covered Mountain. He casts a Gamble of his own, paying the Rhystic tax. He fetches up a card into his hand and then randomly discards a Skyclave Apparition. He casts a Mana Crypt and Zane draws through Rhystic. Ryan casts Recruiter of the Guard and Zane draws through Rhystic. Recruiter enters and Ryan fetches up a Dockside Extortionist into his hand. Ryan ends his turn. Tyler draws and casts Rhystic Study. Zane Study triggers and he draws. In response, Zane casts Force of Negation for its alternate cost, exiling a blue card. Tyler's Study is countered and exiled, and Tyler passes the turn. Zane draws and casts a Felwar Stone. Zane passes. During his upkeep, Mike puts a counter onto Aether Vial. He draws and moves to combat. He attacks Zane with Thrasios. Ignoble Hierarch's Exalted triggers, giving Thrasios +1/+1. Zane takes it, and Mike ships the turn to Ryan. During his upkeep, Ryan wins his Mana Crypt roll. He draws and casts a Dockside Extortionist. Rhystic triggers and Zane draws. In response, Zane flashes in a Dress Down. It enters and Zane draws again. Ryan begins to ask why Mike gets a Dockside in 4 colors but Ryan does it in Boros colors. Then Dockside resolves, but doesn't create any treasures due to Dress Down. An incredibly salty Ryan passes to Tyler. At the end of Ryan's turn, Dress Down is sacrificed. Tyler draws, takes no actions, and passes. Zane draws and casts an Esper Sentinel. He casts a Dockside Extortionist of his own. It enters, and in response, Mike cracks his treasure's floating mana. Then Zane creates 4 treasures. He casts Abeyance, targeting Mike. In response, Mike activates Thrasios, scrying 1 and revealing a Mana Crypt into his hand. Mike also activates Ether Vial, putting Elvish Mystic onto the battlefield. Then Abeyance resolves, and Zane draws a card. Zane casts a Mana Crypt. He casts a Twin Flame, targeting his Dockside Extortionist. He holds priority and flashes in a Dualcaster Mage. No one has any responses, and Dualcaster resolves. Zane presents a loop of making infinite hasty Dualcasters, attacking the table, and wins the game. Well, that game was even faster this time. The team has another one left in them, so let's go again. In this game, Zane brings back Hinata, and its opening hand contains a City of Brass, Dress Down, Gamble, Esper Sentinel, Ancient Tomb, Bloodstained Mire, and a Sea of Clouds. Mike brings back Thrasios and Vial Smasher, and his opening hand contains a Bloodstained Mire, Ancient Tomb, Elvish Mystic, Ignoble Hierarch, Demonic Consultation, Swan Song, and a Reanimate. Ryan brings back Aurelia, and his opening hand contains a Dockside Extortionist, Prismatic Vista, Lotus Petal, Steel Shaper's Gift, Unexpectedly Absent, Oswald Fiddlebender, and an Archon of Emeria. Tyler brings back Kenrith, and his opening hand contains a Breeding Pool, Watery Grave, Fiery Islet, Ponder, Esper Sentinel, Noble Hierarch, and his London Mulligan is Azurta the Dawnwaker. And Zane gets to start us off. Zane draws and plays a City of Brass. He taps the City of Brass to help cast an Esper Sentinel. Zane passes. Mike draws and plays a Bloodstained Mire. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a Bayou onto the battlefield. He casts an Ignoble Hierarch and gives the turn to Ryan. Ryan draws and plays a Prismatic Vista. He casts a Lotus Petal. Sentinel triggers and Zane draws. He cracks his Vista, pays a life, and fetches up a Snow-Covered Plains onto the battlefield. He casts Steel Shaper's Gift. He fetches up a Sword of Hearth and Home into his hand and gives the turn to Tyler. Tyler draws and plays a Hallowed Fountain into play untapped, paying 2 life. He casts an Esper Sentinel of his own. The table realizes it's going to be one of those games, and Tyler ends his turn. Zane draws and plays a Bloodstained Mire. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a Volcanic Island onto the battlefield. He casts Gamble. He fetches up a card into his hand and then randomly discards a Dress Down. The table cheers, especially Ryan, and then Zane casts a Mana Crypt. Zane ends his turn. Mike draws and plays an Ancient Tomb. He casts an Elvish Mystic. Mike passes. Ryan draws and plays an Urza Saga, getting its first counter. He casts a Dockside Extortionist. It enters and Ryan creates 3 treasures. He casts Sword of Hearth and Home. Both Sentinels trigger and Ryan pays for Zane's and Tyler draws. Swords resolves and Ryan ships the turn to Tyler. Tyler draws and plays a Watery Grave into play untapped, paying 2 life. He casts Dark Confidant. He attacks Zane with his Sentinel. Zane takes it and Tyler passes. During his upkeep, Zane wins his Mana Crypt roll. He draws and plays a Mana Confluence. He taps his Mana Confluence and his City of Brass and exiles Simeon's Spirit Guide to help cast his commander, Hinata, Dawncrowned. In response, Mike casts Force of Will, exiling a blue card and paying 1 life. Both Sentinels trigger, and Mike taps his Ancient Tomb to pay for both of them. Hinata is countered, and Zane follows up by casting Mystic Remora. In response, Mike casts Demonic Consultation. It resolves, and Mike names Dockside Extortionist. He exiles the top 6, and then exiles until he finds it, and then puts it into his hand. Then Remora resolves, and Zane passes to Mike. Mike draws and casts Dockside Extortionist. It enters, and Mike creates 6 treasures. He casts his commander, Thrasios, Triton Hero. He casts Finehorn Elves. Mike passes. Ryan draws, and in his first main phase, Urza Saga gets another counter. He plays a Plateau for turn. He equips Sword of Hearth and Home onto his Dockside Extortionist. He attacks Zane with his Dockside. Zane takes it, and Sword of Hearth and Home trigger. Ryan exiles Dockside and then fetches up a Snow-Covered Mountain. He then puts both onto the battlefield. Dockside triggers, and Ryan creates 8 treasures. In his second main phase, Ryan casts Oswald Fiddlebender. He casts an Archon of Emeria. Ryan passes to Tyler. During his upkeep, Tyler reveals a regrowth through Dark Confidant. He draws and plays a Breeding Pool into play tapped. He casts Mystic Remora. Zane's Remora and Sentinel trigger. Tyler pays for Sentinel, and Zane draws through Remora. In response to Tyler's Remora, Mike taps his Ancient Tomb to cast Winds of Rebuke, targeting his own Dockside. Both Sentinels and Remora trigger. Mike pays for the Sentinels, and Zane draws through Remora. Then Winds resolves, Dockside bounces, and everyone mills too. Then Tyler's Mystic Remora resolves. He attacks Zane with Esper Sentinel and Dark Confidant. Zane takes it, and Tyler gives a turn to Zane. During his upkeep, Zane loses his mana crypt roll and takes 3 damage. He pays to keep his Remora. He draws and plays an Ancient Tomb into play tap through Archon. Zane passes. Mike draws and casts Dockside Extortionist. It enters and Mike creates 10 treasures. Locked out by Archon, Mike passes. During Ryan's upkeep, to prevent him from winning the game, Zane taps his mana confluence to cast Silence. Tyler's Remora and Sentinel trigger. Zane pays for Sentinel and Tyler draws through Remora. Silence resolves, locking Ryan out of casting spells this turn. He draws and Urza Saga gets his final counter. Ryan sacrifices it and fetches up an Esper Sentinel onto the battlefield, which he isn't able to do. No one else caught it, and you should all go to the comments and tell Ryan what a bad Magic player he is. Anyway, Ryan plays a Sunbaked Canyon for turn. He equips Sword of Hearth and Home to his Dockside. He attacks Zane with Dockside again. Zane takes it and Sword triggers. Ryan exiles Dockside and fetches up a Snow-Covered Plains. He puts both onto the battlefield and Dockside triggers. In response, Mike cracks his treasures to activate Thrasios, scrying 1 and revealing a Taiga onto the battlefield tapped. He cracks more treasures to activate Thrasios again, scrying 1 and revealing a Dauthi Voidwalker into his hand. Then Dockside's ability resolves and Ryan creates 9 treasures. In his second main phase, Ryan activates Oswald Fiddlebender, sacrificing a treasure and fetching up an Ether Vial onto the battlefield. All finished up, Ryan passes. During his upkeep, Tyler reveals a Chrome Mox through Dark Confidant. Still in his upkeep, he pays for his Mystic Remora. He draws and plays an Ancient Tomb into play tapped. He casts Ponder, Zane's Remora and Sentinel trigger, and he draws 2. Then Ponder resolves, Tyler looks at the top 3, doesn't like what he sees, shuffles, and draws. Finished casting his 1 spell per turn, Tyler passes. During his upkeep, Zane loses his mana crypt roll and takes 3 damage. He pays to keep his Remora. He draws and plays a Sea of Clouds into play tapped. He taps his Mana Confluence and his Ancient Tomb to help transmute Muddle the Mixture. He fetches up a Drannith Magistrate into his hand. He taps the City of Brass to help cast Drannith Magistrate, much to the chagrin of Ryan. It resolves and Zane passes the turn. At the end of Zane's turn, Mike taps his Ancient Tomb to help activate Thrasios, scrying 1 and revealing a Divining Witch into his hand. Mike draws and casts Dauthi Voidwalker. He passes. At the end of Mike's turn, Ryan casts Swords to Plowshares, targeting Drannith Magistrate. Tyler's and Zane's Remoras and Sentinels all trigger. Ryan pays for the Sentinels and they all draw through the Remoras. Then Drannith is exiled and Zane gains 1. The turn moves to Ryan. During his upkeep, Ryan puts a charge counter onto Ether Vial. He draws and casts his commander, Aurelia the War Leader. In response, Mike taps his Ancient Tomb to help activate Thrasios, scrying and revealing a Tainted Pact into his hand. Mike, wanting his opponents to draw into interaction, responds by casting Vampiric Tutor. Ryan's Sentinel, Tyler's Sentinel and Remora, and Zane's Sentinel and Remora all trigger. Mike lets Tyler and Zane both draw 2 cards each, and then he pays for Ryan's Sentinel. Unfortunately, neither drew into the interaction that they can use, and Vampiric Tutor resolves. Mike fetches up a card onto the top of his library and loses 2 life. Then Aurelia resolves. Ryan equips Sword of Hearth and Home to his Archon of Emeria. He presents a loop of attacking with his Archon and Aurelia, getting in extra combat, flickering Aurelia through Sword, and repeating. He repeats this loop over and over until his opponents are dead, and Ryan wins the game. Ladies and gentlemen, what a fun set of games tonight. Congrats to Zane and Ryan on their wins. In games 1 and 2, Zane's value and well-timed interaction allowed him to close out the game in short fashion. In game 3, Ryan's value through Sword of Hearth and Home and his stacks pieces were what allowed him to cross the finish line. The most valuable card in tonight's first game goes to Hinata, Dawncrowned. This commander made everyone's interactions strictly worse and put the squeeze on them to be able to effectively stop Zane. It also allowed Zane to completely hose the table with his Heliod's intervention. In game 2, the most valuable card goes to Abeyance. This card isn't seen much, but it grants the ability to shut off a player from interacting as well as attempting to find your own interaction as well. This card shut off Mike and allowed Zane to go off and win. In game 3, the most valuable card goes to Sword of Hearth and Home. This card allowed Ryan to gain more and more value even when not comboing off. He was able to ramp and flicker Dockside repeatedly. This allowed him to pull ahead and eventually use Sword to close out the game with his commander. A special thanks to our Mox Pearls, Zane and Tyler, for playing in tonight's game. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode. Tune in next time when we duke it out to see who will be king of the competitive EDH table. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.